It is hurricane season. If you live in Florida, along the coast, whether that is the Gulf or the Atlantic, you know that for a few months we all kind of hold our breath for a little bit and hope that this is another season that we just skirt on by and we just fly under the radar. And there are a lot of pet preparedness information, documents, guidelines out there floating around, and a lot of them are very, very helpful. And I think a lot of pet parents are aware of them. The basics: food, water, medications, records. And they absolutely matter. I also, being a non-traditional veterinarian, want to talk about some of the things that probably aren't talked about enough, probably aren't thought about enough, that do make a difference when it comes to your pets in this hurricane season, and a real impact on their health as well, before, during, and after the storm. So here I want to talk about some non-traditional tips that I recommend to pet parents that a lot of pet parents are like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. That's a really good point. And especially those who are feeding fresh food, maybe working on a chronic health issue, maybe finally have it under control, or simply wanting to be as prepared as possible beyond the basics of food, water, medication, and records. Number one tip is don't start a new food right before a hurricane. And I know this may sound obvious. However, sometimes things get the best of us. Sometimes storms change course very quickly, and we weren't ready for it. But I would say that if you are in a place where you think about hurricane season, and what I mean by that is if you're living in Montana, you're like, I don't even know when hurricane season is. And we are so thankful that you don't have to worry about it. You have to deal with other things such as snow and blizzards. But now is probably the time, if you were considering, you've been wanting to switch your pet's food, I probably would do it now. It's early June. That's the time to do it. Rather, the later we get in the season, the things get spiced up a little bit more. So one of the biggest mistakes I see is pet parents making a diet change right before a stressful event. And a hurricane can be a very stressful event. Not only is the weather changing, the routines are changing, maybe there's evacuation, maybe there's heavy rains and that stresses out your pet, maybe there's thunder and lightning, heavy winds. And so stress alone can impact digestion. Stress alone can affect appetite. Stress alone can affect the gut microbiome, the community in their gut. Stress alone can affect their stool quality. So if your dog is already, or your pet or your cat is already navigating some environmental changes, loud noises, schedule disruptions, dynamic changes in the household, evacuation plans, adding a new food, a new treat, a new snack can maybe make it a little bit difficult to know what's actually causing the digestive upset. So if you've been thinking about changing foods, I would either get it done now while hurricane season is at the very, very beginning, or wait until maybe we're towards the end of it. You could absolutely take a risk and you're like, well, 7-day forecast says there's nothing brewing out there. You can also know that sometimes these things take time to manifest. And so if you're going to make any changes that you have control over, that you've been wanting to do, I probably would do them now. Number 2 would be protect your fresh food investment. If you feed fresh food or something that is kept in the fridge or the freezer, that is the only way it is stored. It is raw food. It is home cooked. It is gently cooked commercial. I would do some extra planning. Power outages can happen very quickly. They are almost always unpredictable unless you live in an area you're like, well, if it rains really heavy, we lose power. If it gets windy, we lose power. But most of the time, you don't plan to lose power. You don't know you're going to, and you sure as heck don't know how long you're going to be out of power. So think through your backup plan now, rather than during the storm, rather than right before the storm again, so you're not switching food right before the storm. Can you keep your freezer doors closed? How much storage do you have in there? Do you have a generator? Is it portable? Is it a whole house? How long can this run? And this is where I tell pet parents that I work with, again, in person or consults, and we're virtual, and they are maybe on the coast in Texas or the coast of Georgia or South Carolina or the panhandle of Florida. Like, consider having a shelf-stable option as a backup. Whether it is temporary, whether it is for evacuation only, whether it is for power loss only. Again, don't wait until then to try it out on your pet, even if your pet is not picky. And I hear pet parents do that. Well, my pet's not picky. I'm not worried about trying it. Just because they're not picky doesn't mean that their gut is going to agree with it or not have an adjustment period. And I don't know about you, but when there's a hurricane coming through, who wants to deal with diarrhea and GI upset and all the other things that can be affecting our pet? So having a shelf-stable option may give you a few days of flexibility. And I say if you're going to do that, if you're someone that feeds raw or gently cooked or home cooked, that having a shelf-stable option I think is always good to have on hand. Even if you don't live in a hurricane evacuation or hurricane zone, I think it's always good. In fact, just this past week, I had a nutrition consult with a pet parent who lives in a state that the southern part can be affected by hurricanes, but where she's living does not. She's so far north and inland. And she was ordering less processed food that needed to be refrigerated, and it got sent to the wrong address. And she ran out. And so she was scrambling. And so she had to go back to the traditional ultra processed kibble because she's like, I didn't know what else to go to because he's never had anything else. And so I think even if you feed any of these and you don't deal with hurricane season, it's always good to have a shelf-stable option that you know your pet likes and can handle. So I always encourage pet parents to have a backup, to maybe consider having a cooler, depending on, if you have a fridge and freezer in your garage, do you have a backup like outside that you can store all this so you're not going to be opening as much? Do you have a generator? But having a cooler that maybe has a lot of ice packs in it so that this food can be protected. We all know that these types of food come with an investment. And again, and I've said this before, that you're going to pay, I believe you're going to pay no matter what for your pet's health, whether you're feeding ultra processed food or gently cooked. But if you're investing in that, protect the investment. So not because you're expecting the worst, but because preparation reduces stress. Preparation reduces hiccups as well. Tip number 3 is think about your pet's microbiome. One thing we don't think enough about beforehand is how stress affects the gut. I think we think about it afterwards. Oh, we were stressed and that's why there's diarrhea and there was this and that happened. But the gut and the nervous system communicate directly, and they communicate quite frequently. So when they experience stress, the gut often responds. Sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's mild, sometimes it's under the hood, behind the curtain that we don't see, and sometimes it is a big event. It's a big obvious event. There's a pattern to it. And so the same thing happens. It can happen with us, it can happen with our pets, and sometimes they'll develop loose stools. Sometimes their appetite will change. Sometimes they will vomit. Sometimes they will get diarrhea. Sometimes they will decide to be a picky eater. And so supporting gut health doesn't mean you have to panic and buy supplements. It means recognizing the stress patterns and how stress influences the gut and being proactive about it, about routine and consistency and knowing what your pet does best with and how your pet is best managed during these flare-ups. If your pet gets stressed with storms and you're getting a big hurricane and you're in the direct path and you're not evacuating, obviously there's only so much you can control, but knowing what triggers your pet to help support them, knowing that maybe they do better when they are eating a certain type of food or when they're not eating a certain type of snack, but having this ahead of time rather than you being seen by your vet after the fact for what we call the quote unquote stress colitis, and then I'm going to hold your hand when I say this, and then getting metronidazole, which there are way better options to treating stress colitis, stress upset stomachs, stress tummy issues. And so being very mindful of that. Tip number 4, non-traditional, not talked about enough, is consider air quality after the storm. Most people think about flood water. They think about standing water. They think about debris. Few people think about air quality after a storm, because after a storm, we often have increased moisture. There may be water damage. There could be mold growth. There can be environmental changes. Things can be kicked up. There can be mildew stirred up. And so for sensitive pets, this may contribute to worsening allergies, itchy skin, coughing, sneezing, respiratory irritation or issues. In fact, it was about a month ago, I was at a hospital and I was sitting in the doctor's office typing my notes and I heard 2 receptionists talking, and I will admit I don't remember how the conversation started, but my ears pinged because they were talking about how ever since we had those 2 back-to-back hurricanes here in the Tampa Bay area in 2024, if you're in the Tampa Bay area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it was like the 100-year flood. We had areas flood that have never, ever flooded before from a hurricane that was like 100 miles off the coast. And those receptionists, they were both saying how ever since those storms, they have seen so many more pets without quote unquote, and they didn't say quote unquote, I'm saying quote unquote allergy issues, way more itchy skins, way more ear issues, just way more skin irritation. And I don't think that we think about the air quality and what can be getting kicked up, especially when there's water damage, when there is things that are kicked up in the environment. And so if your pet struggles with chronic allergies, environmental sensitivities, respiratory issues, pay attention, especially after the storm, for days and weeks following it. Obviously, this is dependent on, did you evacuate? Did you not evacuate? What was the situation around your home? What happened to your home? Where did you go evacuate to? If you left your home, what facility or home were you in, and potentially your pet was exposed to as well? So sometimes it's not the actual storm that's the issue, it's what comes after the storm. Tip number 5 is have an indoor enrichment plan. A lot of dogs, and this is more towards dogs, I don't know many cats that go for walks, although some do. Many dogs are used to daily walks. Many dogs are used to a daily routine where they are getting outside. They're stretching, they're chasing a ball, they're going to a doggy park, they're running with their pet parents. There's outdoor time, there's routine activities, there's snifaris, and a hurricane can absolutely disrupt that very quickly. If you're stuck inside for a day or several days, I remember a few years ago that there was a hurricane that sat over the Bahamas for literally like over 24 hours. It just sat there. So that's not even talking about the leading up to the storm, getting close and all those bands and the storm leaving. And so it's potential that you can be stuck inside for a day or a few days, depending on the path and how quick the storm is moving. So boredom can become a problem, which can affect their anxiety, which can affect their gut. And so boredom can lead to stress. Again, how stress can affect the gut. So think ahead. Think about your pet, how they typically enjoy enrichment, what they've been exposed to. If you're like, I've tried a snuffle mat and they didn't like it. So just think ahead for food puzzles, snuffle mats, training sessions, hide and seek. In fact, I just had a pet parent tell me that she plays duck, duck, goose with her dog, which is, how cute is that? And that he always likes to be the goose. So hide and seek games, scent work, you can hide food, again, depending on the type of food. This is where, again, having a shelf-stable option can be really valuable, a less processed shelf-stable option where you can maybe hide some pieces of quote-unquote kibble of freeze-dried and hide it around the house where they search and sniff for it. You don't need anything fancy. There are some enrichment toys. I do urge caution on using a lot of frozen enrichment toys. Obviously, if you're like, this is the only thing that's going to keep my pet calm, we can't go outside, or we're evacuated and there's not much area where we're in, is of course, yes, protect your sanity and theirs. I just urge caution with a lot of frozen enrichment because a lot of cold things takes a lot of digestive energy, and we don't want to weaken digestive energy over the time. On the rare occasion, not terribly worried about it. And so the goal is, again, nothing fancy, but it's simply giving your pet an outlet. It's simply helping them get their enrichment. It is helpful for their mental stimulation. And so maybe that's finding a part of your house where you can throw a ball or a toy for them and do it for 10 or 15 minutes, again, to just help that enrichment. And it may even help their stress levels because they're not focused on whatever else is going on in the environment. Download important records now. So make sure you have access to any records that you would need: medication lists, blood work, microchip information, prescriptions, frequency, dosages, that you have that information. Definitely try and create a calm space for your pet. Not every pet is bothered by storms, but many are. Some are bothered more by thunder, some are bothered more by wind, some are bothered more by rain, some are bothered by all of it. And some of them are not even bothered by the storms, but they're picking up on our energy and our stress. So play and see what that is. At a crate. Sometimes pets like going in their crate. It's their safe space. Sometimes it's your bedroom. Sometimes it's a quiet closet. Sometimes it's right next to you. Sometimes it's with a room with a window that they can look out. Obviously, during hurricanes, that's a little bit different depending on the structure of your home. If you have impact windows, if you have shutters, if you have clear shutters, there's so many aspects to it. But consider a calming space ahead of time that you know that your pet is going to feel calm and safe. Definitely have familiar bedding and toys, maybe a blanket, something that is familiar for their scent for them as well. So the biggest tip too, I think, is practice before you need it. So don't wait until a hurricane is coming to test any of these with your pet. Whether it is a calming supplement, whether you are going traditional prescriptions, whether you are changing their food, whatever it is, practice loading in the car, practice being in the crate, practice the backup food now, locate your records now. So figure it all out now. It's early June before we head into like August, September, October, which I feel like is when a lot of us, not to say nothing can happen before, but that is definitely the hold your breath time. So hurricane season is not just and only about being prepared. It's not just about survival. It's also about reducing stress. It's also about before the storm preparation. So it's also protecting the progress you've made on your pet's health. If you've been getting their gut microbiome back, if you've been detoxing them, if you've been managing their allergies, and you've been doing non-traditional thinking outside the box aspects, protect it. You put a lot of time and effort into it. It's creating a plan that works for you and your pet and allows you to focus on your family instead of scrambling when the storm is coming. You doing preparation now, you being mindful of all of these things now could hopefully make easier decisions and outcomes better afterwards. If you found this helpful, absolutely share it with a pet parent who's maybe in a hurricane area. And here is to us crossing our fingers that we smooth sail through this season.